Welcome back, everyone, to the Thought Experiment, a debate series brought to you by Skeptic Haven. For tonight, the question on the table is, does the Bible promote evidence-based faith? And will be debated by James Prest taking the affirmative position and Alan Bondar taking the negative. I am JL from the channel Bridge the Divide, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. Thank you all for joining us.
Where ideas enter the ring.
All right. For the format for tonight's debate will consist of 10-minute openings from each interlocutor, followed by 15 minutes of cross-examination, followed by a 40-minute allotment for open dialogue, and 5 minutes each for closing statements. Afterwards, we will open the discussion up to the audience, to you, the audience, for open Q&A. So be sure to tag your burning questions for the interlocutors with @Skeptic Haven, all one word, @Skeptic Haven, to ensure that we see them. So if we are ready to go, gentlemen, we will start tonight's debate with the affirmative position. James, you have 10 minutes for your opening, and the clock will start on your first word.
Thank you. Does the Bible promote evidence-based faith? Yes, it does. It is based on the testimonial evidence of the people who wrote the Bible. My opponent may say that this is weak evidence, and while I will concede that testimonial evidence is a weaker form of evidence because people can easily lie or be honestly mistaken, it is still evidence. Thus, I have an entire book of evidence. One of the writers of this book says, "And many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written, that ye might believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing ye might have life through his name." Now, my opponent may say that testimonial evidence alone is sufficient to believe even a stranger regarding trivial things such as what he ate for breakfast, but is not sufficient should he claim something radical, such as that a man rose from the dead. Once again, I will concede. However, I would like to point out that sufficient evidence for or against God claims cannot be demonstrated in a debate. My opponent knows this, and that is quite possibly why he is a skeptic. He knows that it cannot be sufficiently demonstrated that a God exists, and he knows that it cannot be sufficiently demonstrated that a God does not exist. This is why he sits on the fence and says, "I don't know." Therefore, the very fact that he is skeptic is the evidence that it would be ludicrous for him to demand sufficient evidence from me for my claim that God exists. Now that that is settled, let's address more interesting matters. At their core, all worldviews are unjustifiable. Agrippa's trilemma demonstrates this. For those who don't know, Agrippa's trilemma states that all attempts to rationally justify a claim eventually reduce down to circular reasoning, infinite regression, or dogmatism. For example, where did the universe come from? The options are 1, it made itself, which is circular reasoning; 2, it's always been here, which is infinite regress; or 3, a God made it, which is dogmatism. I do not point this out to terminate the debate by saying that all claims are unjustifiable, but to point out one critical thing. All possible options are insane. That is correct. If the universe made itself, that's insane. If the universe has always been here, that's insane. And if a God made it, that too is insane. This is because all possible options involve something infinite, and that's insane. The human mind cannot wrap around the infinite and therefore cannot justify it. So whatever the truth is regarding the origin of the universe, it has to be insane. Now, if we look in history, we find a book that makes such insane claims. It says that an infinite God did it. So far, I am meeting the criteria. But there is more. While the Bible does promote testimonial evidence as the reason for faith, there is a form of evidence available that only exists after the individual first exercises faith. This evidence is often called verification through participation. I shall demonstrate. Your friend says that if ever you are in trouble, to call them and they will help. Because you believe their testimony, you actually call them for help, and they come running to your aid. Now you have the evidence of personal experience. You believe them, not merely based on their testimony, but because experience has taught you that their testimony is true. However, you would not have this evidence had you not first believed in their testimony enough to call on them for help. Now let's take this concept over to the Bible. The Bible states that the reason Jesus' name is Jesus is because he will save people from their sins, Matthew 1:21. In John 8:32 through 36, Jesus teaches that he will set people free from actively committing sin. That's a radical claim. And the Bible teaches that the Lord will do this for us if we call upon his name for deliverance. Now, if Jesus prevented us from committing sin, it would be a powerful form of evidence. It might not be evidence of a resurrection or that God made the universe, but it would evidence that which I think most people would agree is a miracle. To stop sinning is radically insane. It's so insane that I cannot even get my fellow Christians to believe it. They will believe that a man walked on water, rose from the dead, and ascended to heaven on a cloud, but they will not believe that that same Jesus will make them stop sinning, even though that is precisely what he promised. But do remember that this evidence of verification through participation is only available to the person who believes enough to call on Jesus for help against sin and who sincerely wants that help. Jesus does not work miracles to satisfy skeptical curiosity, but to alleviate real needs. But if there is a sincere desire to permanently stop doing evil, yet you feel you lack faith to believe, you can cry out, as did the man in Mark 9:24, "Help my unbelief." If you do this, Jesus will help you. Thus, this experience-based evidence is available to everyone. If you already believe in Jesus, you can call on him to make you stop sinning. And if you don't believe in Jesus at all, your heart can still cry out for help. This evidence is so readily available to everyone that Paul says it this way: "The word is nigh thee, even in thy mouth and in thy heart." That is the word of faith. If you sincerely want to stop sinning, call out to him with the word that's in your mouth and in your heart. It is even at the very tip of your lips. Whether you are my opponent actively listening to this opening statement, or you are part of the live audience, or you are just listening to this recording, this evidence is available to you if you sincerely want to stop sinning. Finally, I will explain why God makes faith the requirement to enter the kingdom of heaven. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. If you do not trust the king, then the kingdom is divided and will fall. To prevent his kingdom from falling, God won't allow anyone in it who does not trust him. God did not arbitrarily make faith in him the requirement of citizenship in his eternal kingdom. He made faith the requirement because it has to be. And with that, I will concede my time.
You are muted, JL. We're not hearing you.
Sorry, that's my bad. Thank you for that opening, James. Alan, if you are ready, you have 10 minutes for your opening. The clock will start on your first word.
In 2 Corinthians 5:7, Paul wrote, "For we live by faith, not by sight." Paul draws a contrast between faith-based life and an empirically based life. This does not sound like the Bible promotes evidence-based faith. To the contrary, the Bible's message is, just trust us, we saw it. We believed based on evidence, but you must believe based on faith. Faith is a method of forming beliefs without sufficient justification. As you can see at the outset, I am drawing a distinction between faith and belief. They are not strictly the same thing, though they are sometimes used interchangeably. I propose that belief is the result of the conclusions drawn from whatever method you are using to determine reality. In other words, if you use empirical evidence to draw conclusions, you will believe things based on that evidence. If you use faith to draw conclusions, you will believe things that you want to believe, whether they are true or not. The debate tonight is over whether or not the Bible promotes evidence-based faith. My position is that this question is itself irrational. There is no such thing as evidence-based faith. If your conclusions are evidence-based, then you don't need faith. And if your conclusions are based on faith, then you don't need evidence because your conclusions aren't based on the evidence anyway. Now, theists often like to say that atheists have faith too. For example, you might say to your 16-year-old who is nervous about passing their driver's test, "I have faith in you." When we speak like that, we're not talking about things we know because they have already been demonstrated to be true. We're talking about things we have a fair amount of confidence in because we have enough evidence to establish that confidence. But we are not saying that we know our teen will pass the test. We're saying we're confident in their ability based on previous knowledge about them. Faith here is being used as confidence based on evidence. This will be the same as having faith that your spouse won't cheat on you. You have confidence based on previous knowledge. And this is the way theists often think they're using faith when they claim that they have evidence-based faith. They think that they have sufficient evidence to substantiate their faith. But this is not really the way they are using faith. When a theist uses faith, they claim they know with certainty that God exists. There are, of course, the odd Christians that admit there isn't evidence to know for sure that God exists, as James pointed out, while at the same time claiming to have a personal relationship with this God that they aren't certain exists. That's suspicious, but this is a clear demonstration of being brainwashed. The fact that they maintain they have a personal relationship with this God makes it kind of hard for them to admit that they don't have sufficient justification to believe he exists. So they believe he exists while claiming they can't be sure. When it comes to belief in God, you're either A or not A. You're either convinced he exists or you're not convinced he exists. Theists who approach the God question with this dogmatic uncertainty simply don't want to admit that they have become convinced that he exists based on faith alone. They know how irrational that is, but since they believe God exists, they try to rationalize their irrationality. If you're convinced he exists, the question comes down to why. This is not the same as saying you're convinced your teen will pass their driver's test or that your spouse won't cheat on you. You know both your teen and your spouse exist. And also, it doesn't require extraordinary evidence to believe these things because, well, they happen in the natural world every day. Theoretically, if you want to discuss whether you're convinced God is good or not, that would be the parallel, were you to know he existed. But you need to have a reason to believe he exists first before the question of whether he will pass a test or be faithful even matters to your life. You must first have evidence that God exists, or a method to test the supernatural. To date, we've yet to see one that can reliably do that. What we have is empirical evidence that is insufficient to draw any definitive conclusions about how or why the universe exists. The theist takes the inconclusive evidence and just decides that it must be a supernatural creator called God and that it's this specific God. They draw a conclusion without sufficient justification. That is what faith is. Faith is a method itself that drives one's best guess and then declares that guess to be certainly true. It is a method of drawing conclusions and thus forming beliefs without sufficient justification. My opponent, James, will attempt to demonstrate that faith is the result of having sufficient justification, or at least as he puts it, sufficient evidence. He will attempt to argue that the Bible promotes evidence-based faith. But drawing a conclusion based solely on testimonies and anecdotes and a religious history book we can't know is true is not evidence-based. It is a guess based on what might fill the gap that the circumstantial evidence didn't close. That is not an evidence-based conclusion. That is a guess-based conclusion. Evidence-based belief requires empirical data, something the belief in the supernatural doesn't have, which is why it is faith-based. Faith is satisfied with filling in gaps just because they're uncomfortable. Imagine James is on trial for murder, and the prosecution proves without a shadow of a doubt that the person who committed the murder was indeed a human. Is that enough to prove that James was the murderer? Of course not. But let's say the judge then asks the prosecutor if they have any evidence that James was the murderer. At that point, the prosecutor says, "You just need to have faith, Your Honor." It is doubtful that James would be comfortable with the judge drawing a conclusion that he was the murderer just because the prosecutor was able to prove that a human did it. That is what we call inconclusive evidence. And yet, this is how the theist concludes that God exists. Something, somehow, must have brought the universe into existence. And that, Your Honor, is God. How do I know? You just need to have faith. This is the same as saying that since a human did it, we have sufficient evidence to draw the conclusion that James was the murderer. And yes, I doubt very much that James would agree that the evidence a human committed the murder should be sufficient to draw the conclusion that he was that human. Consider what Paul said in Romans 4:5. However, to the one who does not work but trusts God who justifies the ungodly, their evidence-based faith is credited as righteousness. If faith here means evidence-based faith, then the demons of James 2:19 would also be credited as righteous. After all, the demons obviously believed God exists and based on empirical evidence, so their faith ought to be credited as righteous. And yet, the demons believe and shudder. Grace-based faith is not evidence-based faith. Evidence-based faith spits in the face of grace. Ephesians 2:8 says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God." The biblical doctrine of faith is that it is affected by grace. Grace becomes unnecessary if there is sufficient evidence to believe in God. It's called grace because it's unmerited. You can't have faith without it. And this was the case throughout the Bible. It would seem that nobody had evidence-based faith in the Old Testament. Galatians 3:24-25 says this, "So the law was our guardian until Christ came, that we might be justified by evidence-based faith. Now that this evidence-based faith has come, we are no longer under a guardian." So did the Old Testament saints have evidence-based faith, or did they have law to keep them in line until the evidence-based faith arrived? According to Paul, they were waiting for that faith to come. This is strange because it would seem that the Old Testament saints had interactions with God himself, but their faith must have been different than the faith that arrived with Christ. However, this creates a problem with Hebrews 11. It would seem that throughout that chapter, the saints had faith, but it was apparently not evidence-based faith, since that's the faith that arrived with Christ. It was by faith that they came to believe things without evidence, to the degree that they all died without having received anything they were promised. Verse 13. And that approach is exactly how verse 1 defines faith. There we find that faith is the evidence of things unseen. It does not say faith in the evidence or faith is the confidence in the evidence. It says faith is the evidence. Hebrews confirms my definition of faith, that it is a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. The Bible does not promote evidence-based faith. It promotes blind faith based on anecdotes and just trust me, dude, it happened. And it seems as though the writer of Hebrews is instructing everyone who did not witness this supposed evidence of Christ's resurrection to just take it on faith, the same faith that the Old Testament saints had in things unseen. The only people who had evidence were the supposed 500 witnesses and the apostles. But if they had evidence, they didn't need faith. Faith and evidence are diametrically opposed. Interestingly, all of the witnesses had belief that Jesus rose, but they didn't have faith because they didn't need faith. Faith and belief are not the same thing. The Bible does not contain any verses that explicitly use the Greek noun for faith, pistis, or the English phrase had faith to describe the eyewitnesses of Jesus' resurrection. Rather, the gospel writers exclusively use the verb pistuo when describing the reaction of the witnesses. Examples, John saw and believed in John 28, or Thomas believed in John 20:29. They did not have faith. Nobody to whom the message of faith was preached were witnesses of the resurrection, and not a single one of the apostles who supposedly saw Jesus resurrected or ever once said to have faith that Jesus rose from the dead. They all believed because they had empirical evidence, but none of them are said to have faith, with the exception of Paul, who claims he encountered Jesus in a vision on the road to Damascus, which, incidentally, is not evidence-based. Paul is the only one of the apostles that takes the entire account on faith, the only apostle who lived by faith, not by sight. Maybe it's because Paul never actually encountered Jesus, but developed an anecdotal story of his own to justify his belief based on faith. And maybe he made up the rest of the story too, since no other apostles took the resurrection on faith. Only those of us who weren't part of the lucky handful of people to whom Jesus chose to appear have to take this whole story.
That's time.
The Bible does not promote evidence-based faith, but it does tell you to use faith to believe things when there is insufficient evidence to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for that opening. If you're ready, gentlemen, we will move on to the cross-examination section, starting with James. You have 15 minutes, and the clock will start on your first word.
All right. So my first question, Alan, to you is, that last sentence you said there was that we're supposed to believe with evidence until there's a lack of evidence, and then you bridge the gap with faith. Is that correct?
That's what theists do.
That's what theists do. Do you think that there's a problem with that?
I think that is a problem, yes, because
Why?
Why? Because you're drawing a definitive conclusion on something that has insufficient evidence.
When you're saying a definitive conclusion, what are you meaning?
I mean, when you say with certainty, this is the case.
Okay, I understand. So, do you agree that there's a spectrum of you have less faith or reason to believe something and more faith or reason to believe something, and so because the range of evidence goes from like almost nothing to a lot, it will kind of change your spectrum of belief? Does that make sense? Would you agree with that? No? Yes?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. I can take a step.
In other words, the more evidence you have for a thing, the more confident you are that that's true and you'll believe it. Yes or no?
Not necessarily. I think I wait to draw a verdict until, well, at least I attempt to wait to draw a verdict until I have conclusive evidence to draw that verdict. Otherwise, I remain unconvinced. So I'm willing to see a whole bunch of evidence, but the problem is it's like playing the game Clue. If you don't wait until you have all of the options eliminated, so you know you can narrow it down to the exact three things, you're literally just guessing even down to the end. So you might say, well, but I was pretty damn sure it was, Mr. Green in the library with the candlestick or whatever. But if you've ever played Clue and have done that, that's just guessing, and sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you don't. So when it comes to important things in life, like worshiping a God that's going to destroy you forever if you don't, I'd like to have a little bit more conclusive evidence than, well, this seems to be the best guess.
Okay, so you're saying that, well, there's got to be some things about that than in life that you're more sure of and less sure of based off the evidence. Like, do you draw conclusions, like definite positive conclusions about everything, or do you think that it's all like it's either true or not, and I believe it or I don't? Like,
so there are things in life that we have to make decisions about.
Sure.
Because we don't have another choice. And when it's like a mother making a choice about what to do with their child, even if you have inconclusive evidence, you just have to decide something in the moment. So there are things like that you do decide. But when it comes to things that are about life in general and reality, there's no rush to make those decisions. So there's no need to rush to a verdict.
Well, there could be a rush, but yeah, I mean, I understand this. There's no timer. I get your point in that. I guess the reason for asking my reason for asking this is because I'll agree that, and I think I made that pretty clear in my opening statement, that it can't be demonstrated in a debate that, a God exists or a God doesn't. I mean, it can't be done. And I know that even if you take it outside of the debate, it can't be done. And this is why people have been arguing it for a very long time. And so it's not really something that I think you can be like, oh yeah, well, here's the hard evidence. Let's just, put it up like in a museum and everybody can see, here's the proof that there's God, or here's the proof that there's no God. It doesn't work like that. So my next question would be like, how do you think the universe got here? Just out of curiosity, like what?
How do I think it got here?
Yeah. What do you think?
I honestly have no clue. I mean, I have fun making guesses, but I wouldn't say that I think it is this. That would be a statement.
Would you agree that it limits it, that it boils down to three options? And I'll just give you the options. God did it. It made itself, which is kind of like the Big Bang, but sometimes they kind of different variations of it might go back to infinite regression, which is it's always been here and it's been expanding and shrinking, then blowing up again. And like, do you agree that it's more or less got to be along one of those lines?
No.
No?
No.
Can you give me any imaginable option alternatively that could be the case?
Yes, something we can't imagine.
Okay. Oh, that's funny. All right. So, but ultimately, you don't know.
Does anybody?
Well, no, but I'm saying you. Like, ultimately, you're saying you don't know. In other words, you're not making a claim of, well, it's always existed, it made itself, or God did it. You're saying I really don't know, and it's because you don't think that there's conclusive evidence to say for sure.
Correct. I would actually say there is more evidence leaning away from a God at this point than there is evidence for a God. So, I mean, I'm closer to being a Gnostic atheist than I am an agnostic atheist, although I still remain an agnostic atheist because honesty demands that I do that because I can't know for certain. But the evidence for God is severely wanting, as you have admitted. So, I just choose not.
Well, I don't think it's severely wanting. I think it's just lacking. Like, you can't be like, well, here, now that we got this evidence and it meets this certain arbitrary percentage that we need, now it's like proof or conclusive evidence. Like, it's not like that. I do think that there's evidence. I just don't think that you can conclusively demonstrate that evidence in or out of a debate. So, like, does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it makes sense. No. I don't think it makes sense to draw a conclusion based on whatever evidence you think you have.
Okay. That's fine. So let's see. So you did say somewhere in your opening statement that ultimately, because of this gap and the lack of evidence or conclusive evidence, or whatever you want to call it, sufficient evidence, that ultimately that I choose to believe that there is a God, correct?
Well, I don't think faith's a choice, so no, I don't think you choose to believe it.
Well, that I'm guessing. You said something like this. I didn't write it all down word for word, but did you not express something like that more or less?
Yeah, faith is a method by which you draw conclusions, and since you've drawn the conclusion that God exists based on faith, you now believe that.
It's a method by which you draw a conclusion. Okay, yeah. Let me back up a little bit. What is your definition of evidence?
Of evidence?
Yes. What does evidence mean to you? Like, what's the definition?
Well, that's a tough one because evidence can be very vast. But I suppose.
Well, sure, but I'm just asking in general, because the reason is because people talk past each other all the time, and I just want to make sure I know what you're saying when you use these words. So, what is evidence?
I would suppose evidence would be something demonstrable that can demonstrate what you're proposing.
So evidence is demonstrable.
I can give you a lot more. I'm trying to keep it simple, but I can also say it can be independently verified. It's rooted in reality. It doesn't require you to add things that haven't been demonstrated yet or proven yet.
Well, here's why I'm asking. Some people, they think that evidence is only evidence if the thing that it's evidencing is actually provable or proven true. And if it's not that, then it's not evidence. And that's not actually a definition of evidence. And so I'm just wanting to make sure, do you think that it has to actually be able to demonstrate the proof of the thing, or and that thing that it's evidencing has to be true? Or do you think it can be evidence and it's just, and yet the thing that you're trying to evidence is not actually true? Which do you think it is?
I think you can have corroborating evidence or supporting evidence, but I think that falls into a different category of evidence. I think you need to have substantive evidence first, and then that evidence can be corroborated by other evidence, which even solidifies it further. But corroborating evidence can't be used as your main form to demonstrate a proposition.
Okay, all right, I understand. Okay, so you understand that it can go both ways. Okay, great. And your definition of faith is belief without evidence, ultimately. Is that correct?
My definition of faith is that it's a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification.
Without sufficient justification. Okay, so in that sense, I'll agree with you, because, as I said in my opening statement, it can't be justified. I mean, Agrippa's trilemma ultimately demonstrates that, and we're making claims about something great, such as the existence of God, which is a supernatural thing which nobody can demonstrate. So I'll agree with you on that. You did make a comment about 1 Corinthians 5:7. It says, "For we walk by faith, not by sight." And you're citing this as evidence that the Bible promotes evidence faith without evidence, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, but the thing is when you look at the context of it, verse 6 says, "Therefore we are always confident, knowing that whilst we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord." I don't want to get into all of what that means, but let's just go with whatever people popularly believe. For we walk by faith, not by sight. It's based off of testimonial evidence. You are aware of that, right? Because there's a testimony out there, even by the writer of 2 Corinthians, that there's life after death and all this stuff.
No, that there's no empirical evidence that demonstrates anything about the.
I didn't say empirical evidence. I said testimonial evidence.
Oh, you're arguing for testimonial evidence, and I'm saying it's insufficient because it's corroborated.
Right. I understand that, but in other words, what happens a lot of times is when people show me verses or mention verses. Can
I explain? Can I ask your question back and explain what I'm trying to say? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure, so I can understand you better. Yeah, I don't mind.
Okay. Did anybody come back from being out of the body and home with the Lord to come back and tell them, "Hey, this is what happens"?
I think, well,
in that
testimony. I mean, if you're willing to go with the record, which you reject the record, and that's fine. But Lazarus died.
Now I'm talking about in that context.
Oh, in this context
To the Corinthian church. Did anybody go to Corinth? I feel like I'm asking the questions and I'm not supposed to be, so I just want to make sure you're okay with this.
For this time, go ahead.
Okay. Was anybody in Corinth at the time that actually left the body, went home to be with the Lord, and then came back to give this?
I have no idea.
Right. So you're saying this is testimonial evidence, but you actually have no idea.
What do you mean I'm saying?
Because that would be testimonial.
Okay. But in context, he's like, look, he says, therefore, in verse 6, therefore we are always confident, knowing that while we are at home in the body, somehow he knows this, I don't know, maybe testimonial evidence, we are absent from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. But literally, contextually, it's testimonial evidence. And I know you're saying that's not sufficient, and that's fine, but...
I mean, it might be testimonial evidence that they're still at home in the body, but how does that have anything to do with being at home with the Lord? How can they possibly know that?
Well...
Why? You know why? Because we walk by faith.
Evidence.
They walk by faith, not by sight. That's why.
They believe it based off the testimonial evidence. My point in pointing this out is, and I don't know if you gave other verses also as well. Actually, you did Hebrews 11:1, and throughout it, you're kind of using the word faith. I don't think you're meaning to, but the Bible in James chapter 2, I think it is, he points out that there's a difference between dead faith and living faith. And you're mixing them up all the time. And I don't think you're doing it on purpose, but you're mixing them up all the time. And it's important to know which one's being talked about at the time, because otherwise you'll mess it up. But if you look...
2 minutes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay. If you look at Hebrews 11, you mentioned this. It says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It's talking about living faith. And the difference between dead faith and living faith is this. Dead faith is you're believing in a fact that when you believe in it, it doesn't really matter. Like the second coming of Jesus. Look, if you believe it or not, he's still coming. That's that type of thing, right? Jesus is the Son of God. There's one Lord. That's dead faith. It doesn't change anything. But then there's a living faith, which actually changes something. And James says that when you have this faith, it has accompanying works. In other words, whether or not you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, it doesn't change anything. But Jesus says that if you believe in a certain way, then you can move mountains by talking to them. That actually has an impact on reality. And you're mixing them up. I'm going to go ahead and sum up the Hebrews 11:1 thing right quick, which is that a money order is the evidence of the money you can't see, and it's the substance of the money that you're hoping for. It's as much of the evidence that you can get for the thing promised. So in other words, because you believe the promise, that's the money order for the thing promised. So it's that description there, it's actually giving you the description of living faith. It's not actually giving you the description of dead faith. How much time do I have left?
About 10 seconds.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and concede it.
Okay, you good to go? All right. Stop it there. All right. Thank you for that. Alan, if you are ready, you now have 15 minutes for your cross-examination. The clock will start on your first word.
All right, this debate is about whether the Bible promotes evidence-based faith. And so far, I've yet to hear anything from the Bible about evidence promoting evidence-based faith. You have testimonial evidence that you're saying comes from the Bible, but what reason do you have to believe the Bible is true?
What reason do I have to believe that the Bible is true?
Yes.
Well, that's kind of a big question. So I kind of explained this in my opening statement. I said that, look, all worldviews are unjustifiable, and whatever the reason for the existence of the universe is, that's insane. So whatever the truth is regarding like ultimate stuff like this, it's going to be insane. Now, there's a history book as the Bible. It makes some insane claims. So far, I'm meeting the criteria. I know that's very... it's going to be considered insufficient. And I get that. And I agree that it's not going to be conclusive as proof or anything. I've kind of already acknowledged all this.
Let me help you out. Would you say that your belief in the Bible is taken on faith?
I believe the testimony of the people that wrote it, yeah.
Which is also taken on faith because you have no way to interview those people.
I believe that their testimony, I'm accepting their testimonial evidence that what they said is true, yeah.
Right, but what evidence do you have that those people actually even existed?
What evidence do I have that those people existed? Somebody wrote it.
Sure, but how do you know that the people who wrote it then were the people you think they were?
Well, I don't. Like, you could just say, how do I know that they weren't lying and they didn't all make it up? Like, let's say they were who they said they were. Moses was Moses. Like, you could just say, like, well, what if they just lied? Well, I mean, there's no way I could prove that they lied.
Correct.
There's no way I could prove anything. So I understand, and I'm acknowledging and conceding, ultimately, there's no way to prove any of this stuff.
Correct. So you're taking it on faith.
So I explained it. All options are insane. There's a book that dates back, the writings of it go back pretty far. It's making some radical claims, meets one of the three options.
Are insane things taken on evidence or on faith?
Are insane thing? Well, the evidence is that, well, it can be both. But here's the thing: the evidence is that the options for the existence of the universe, they're all insane. The evidence says that they're insane. So right. I have to
but to arrive at a conclusion and say it's definitely this, at this point, since we have insufficient evidence, that conclusion has to be taken on faith.
Yeah, faith bridges the gap. I don't think that there's no
enough answer. Faith bridges the gap. So back to your thing.
I understand.
It's my turn. I can cut you off. Okay, let me cut you off. So faith bridges the gap. Thank you. So you tried to use an analogy with the Hebrews 11:1 about the money order.
Yeah.
And you tried to parallel the money order with the money order is the evidence of things unseen. But that's not exactly what's going on there, because the money order is not paralleled with faith in that situation. You're saying that you have faith in the money order because the money order is evidence of the money that's supposed to come. The money order is not the same as faith. You have to have faith in the money order in order to know that that money order is going to do what it's supposed to do, correct?
I'm saying that faith is the money order.
How is faith the money order?
Because the way that it works, Matthew 9:29 says it this way: according to your faith, be it unto you. Jesus said this to people. In other words, if they had faith to believe that Jesus would, or that Jesus could or would restore their eyesight, then he would. And so it's basically, did they have the faith to believe? And well, their eyesight was healed, so they did. So in other words, things in the Bible are promised if you believe that you'll have them and that he'll give them to you. So the way that faith is the money order is, well, I mean, it says that faith is the evidence of things not seen. The thing that you can't see is that you're going to have your leprosy cleansed, or you're going to stop sinning, or you're going to, whatever the thing is promised. That's the evidence. That's the thing you can't see. And faith is the money order for that. In other words, because according to your faith, be it unto you, if you believe, that's the evidence that you have the thing promised. It's kind of like an acorn, right? So if you have an acorn, that's the promise of the tree that you can't see. Like if you have the acorn, you're going to get the tree.
So couldn't an acorn be evidence of something entirely different? Let me switch the analogy so it will make more sense to my point.
Sure.
If you go outside and the grass is all wet, is that evidence that it rained?
It could be evidence of multiple things. It could be sprinkler system. Somebody dumped water on the ground. Somebody washed the car.
So how would somebody draw the conclusion that it was rain?
How would somebody draw the conclusion that it was rain?
Yes.
Well, they could be wrongly doing it, or they could have checked the weather. They could base it off of whether or not they heard lightning. I mean,
the point is there's not sufficient evidence to actually draw a conclusion, correct? Just by standing outside after it rained, or after the grass is what I mean.
Maybe. I mean, they could be overcast, but sure. I mean, I understand your point.
Sure. And so when you have the clue analogy mixing in with this, you can have a whole bunch of really good evidence that something began all this, even if that is, let's just say that's the case. That's still not enough to draw the conclusion that you're drawing, that it's a God. and that it's this God. And all of that still has to be taken on faith. Let me ask you a question about testimonial evidence.
Yes.
Would you not agree that testimonial evidence is the weakest form of evidence?
Well, I've never categorized them and classified them, but I conceded in my opening statement that it is a weak form of evidence just because somebody can be honestly misled or lying.
Sure. And yet,
I don't know if it's actually the weakest. I mean, maybe.
And yet, it's your primary evidence.
I don't want to say that it's my primary evidence. If you're meaning for the Christian God, then sure. If you're meaning for God, period, no.
So what is your primary evidence?
My primary evidence is that there has to be something insane. I could refer to a whole bunch of like
that's not evidence.
Observations and stuff, but
that is not evidence.
Be conclusive.
That is not evidence, man. Just because you think that something has to be something.
It's evidence. It's not conclusive.
But that's not evidence. That is an attempt to be logical, but it's not necessarily logical. Like, you don't have to necessarily have something insane in order for it to be true. Does something insane make it true?
No, I'm just pointing out that all the options are insane.
All the options you've thought of.
Well, I mean, if you can give me any other options, I'm willing to consider them.
Do you have knowledge of every possible thing that could have possibly come before plank time?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you have full knowledge of every possible option that could have been there before plank time?
No, I don't claim to have all knowledge. I'm willing for you to throw something out there, but I think the only thing that you said was, well, in something that we haven't thought of, those are the options, and then that's not really an option. So.
There are many. In fact, science itself has, like, if I believe, 3 really strong possibilities that they say could be the case. God's never actually come up as an option in the scientific field. He's just the one that's thrown in there because Christians don't like the scientific possibilities. But even science, and there could be other possibilities than the 3 we even think about. So we don't know is the point. There could be a million possibilities prior to space time, and we just can never possibly encounter them. We just don't know.
Yeah, you're essentially appealing to ignorance and saying that all the stuff that we don't possibly know that the answer could be in that. Well, sure, but how could it not be?
If it's well, sure, then well, sure. Like, it's that simple. You cannot say, if you don't have infinite knowledge, that you know for sure that it has to be one of those 3. Those are just 3 guesses at best that we have right now based upon evidence or not evidence, depending on which view it is. But we just don't know because, sure, it could be anything out there. Like, until you can definitively say, I know, Alan, with 1,000,000%, I am certain it has to be one of these 3 and it can't be anything else that we haven't thought of. You can't do that. So until you can do that, you can't possibly conclude that it has to be this because we just don't know. So let's see. You gave a thing from personal experience. Let's talk about personal experience for a second. You said that if you ask a friend to come help you and that friend shows up, that experience validates that you have a friend, essentially?
That their word is good.
That their word is good.
Like, the example that I gave is that if you have a friend and they said, if you need help, I'll help you. Well, you could just believe them based off their testimony. But if you actually do call on them and they do help you, that's an additional form of evidence because now you have the personal experience. Oh, I did it. And they actually helped me.
Right. So the difference, though, is, do you not know your friend exists?
Do I not
know? Do you know? I'll ask it different. Do you know that your friend exists?
I believe that with the things based off of what we talked already. Yeah.
Do you have sufficient evidence to confirm that your friend?
I've already conceded in my opening statement. There's not sufficient evidence to prove either way that there is or isn't.
But if you have evidence that your friend exists, that is the reason you are taking his word as trustworthy because he did what he said he was going to do. You don't know God exists. You don't even have evidence he does. You say, the Bible says this, I do this. Wow, magically they happen. And so therefore God must be true. Like, that is so many leaps in there. Like, you can pray for something, and it turns out that sometimes God says yes, and sometimes God says no, and sometimes God says maybe. And all of them are, you just take God at his word. He's always telling the truth no matter what, right?
What's the question definitively?
When you pray, and
Yeah.
does God always answer no matter what?
Nobody's ever asked me that before, I guess.
So even if the answer is not what you expected, or the outcome doesn't go the way you thought, it's still God, and you just trust him. You take him at his word because
Sure, yeah, I trust him. Yeah, sure, yeah.
Right. So the point is, you can't say that because you think A produces B, that therefore A is caused by God. Because no matter what you do with prayer, it can go the way you expected, it can go the way you didn't expect, or you can say, well, I just don't know yet because nothing's happened, and I think God just said, wait. Like, no matter what happens, you've already concluded that God exists. Am I correct?
Yes.
Right. So you have no real good reason to justify your claim that God exists, like you can a friend who actually shows up and does what he says, and then you can take his word for it. No matter what God supposedly does, it's God. You've already concluded that.
What if he promised something that's insane, like, you don't sin anymore? I can't get Christians to believe that one, so I know that's not going to fly with a lot of people, but Jesus does actually promise that. So what if he actually promised that? I believed that happens, and does that not count as some sort of evidence at all, or no?
Well, it might if sin is actually a thing that existed, but you're taking that on faith too, are you not?
Well, okay, let's just change the word so that way we can actually have the discussion. We'll change the word like immoral behavior, bad behavior, whatever words you want to use. I like, that's fine.
Okay, so you have bad behavior and then you do something good, and that's God?
No, in other words, I ask God to prevent me from doing bad behavior, and he does. All bad behavior that I'm aware of.
Is there ever a time when you ask God to help you do good behavior instead of bad, and you still do bad?
No.
Never.
So I'm not going to say that it's never happened. What
that
I
was my
said,
question. And you're trying to skirt the question and answer it differently.
I'm trying to qualify my answer to make sure that I'm clear. In the past,
I don't need you to qualify it. That's all I needed from that. If you prayed, God do this, and the opposite happened, you've just eliminated the proposition you were just trying to say, that every time
you just not allowing you to qualify, but I'll qualify in the open discussion.
That's fine. You can qualify in the opening conversation. So you want to stop sinning. Number one, I don't really see there's such a thing as sin. And then you said, oh, well, it's just bad behavior, and I want bad behavior to turn to good behavior. And every time I pray and ask God to make me do good behavior, he always does, except sometimes that he doesn't.
No, that's what I said.
Well, okay, let me ask you again then. Are there ever times when you pray that God will help you be good instead of bad, and you're still bad?
That's a very weird way to say it.
No, because you said let's change it, because I don't think it exists.
He always gives me victory over temptation, and he always causes me to do the good thing. What I was trying to qualify before is that in the past, before I understood faith and the gospel properly, I tried really hard to overcome and pray nothing, but I didn't understand, the money order thing. I didn't understand any of that.
James, are you perfect?
No.
Well, then why haven't you just asked God to make you perfect? He'll solve it.
And that's time. All right. That was exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, take a drink, stretch a little bit. This next 30 minutes will be the open discussion.
Isn't it 40 minutes?
Reset.
It's 40.
40 minutes. Sorry. My 40 minutes will be the open discussion. I don't know why I didn't update my script on that. Oh, well. The timer is reset and will start on the first word, gentlemen.
You can go first, James, if you like.
Well, I just kind of want to spin off of where we were, where the last thing you had asked me, am I perfect? So my answer to that question is no, I'm not perfect. But my claim is not to be perfect, but that when I call on Jesus to deliver me from evil and from committing sin, he always faithfully does it every time, consistently, without fail. Now, does that mean that I'm sinless? No. And here's why. Because there's a difference between known sin and unknown sin. I don't claim to know all God's law. So to claim to be sinless, that would be ridiculous of me. But what I do claim is that in all things that I know, like that I know, that I'm convinced of, that yes, this is a moral behavior, and I realize I'm being tempted, that this is evil. Yeah, I call on Jesus every time, guaranteed, without fail. He's always delivered me. 100% full confidence in that. Yes, that's the thing he promised.
But what I'm asking you is, why haven't you asked God to just make you perfect? Isn't that the goal?
Yes. So, but there's
Wouldn't it be easier to just bypass all the prayers and just ask for that one, and then you'd be done with that?
Well, perfection has different stages. So it's kind of like a child. They're newborn. Okay, are they perfect? Well, I mean, as a child, sure, they're perfect as a child, but that doesn't mean there's not room for growth, maturity, increase in knowledge, strength, etc. So, like again, I just as an example, I don't know all of God's law. So I might be a baby in everything that there is to know, but as I learn and that these things are bad, then I can keep calling on Jesus for deliverance from more things. And eventually, I can reach, I guess, the full maturity, perfection thing where I know or not know everything, but know all of God's law, and I don't do anything. I don't sin knowingly or unknowingly, any of it. But I'm not there yet. No.
Okay. So let's return to your analogy of the money order. This is going to take a few minutes to discuss. I didn't want to waste any more time on the question and answer part. You say the money order is faith, and that is the evidence of the unseen thing, right? The money order, specific. The money order itself, though, is the evidence.
The faith is the money order, which is the evidence of the thing you cannot see.
Correct. Yes. So in the analogy, the money order is the evidence.
Yes.
Money order is not in addition to anything else. It is itself the evidence.
Well, it's the evidence of the thing you can't see.
By itself, it is the evidence.
Well, it doesn't mean it's not based off of anything, but it is evidence, yes.
What's it based off of?
Well, testimony.
And how did you draw that conclusion from Hebrews 1?
How did I draw that conclusion from Hebrews 1?
Where I'm going with it is, you said that the money order is synonymous with faith, and I'm saying you said the money order itself is the evidence of the things unseen. And let's go back now to faith. It is the evidence. It's not faith in the evidence. He's not saying faith is the confidence in the evidence. It's just faith is the evidence. And you can't say, well, it's the evidence plus there's other things and it's based on this. The word is a very strong word. It is definitive.
Yeah. I understand. I explained this, if I may. I explained this in my opening statement. So first, you have a friend and they said that they'll help you. That's testimonial evidence. But then when you actually call on them and it gets, which in this case is the money order, then you get the additional form of evidence. But the reason, I'm trying to think, I don't want to get lost in my words and I don't want to confuse you either. Yeah, I lost it. Go ahead. I want to make sure that I answer your question, and I got lost in my head. So just go ahead.
That's all right. I just don't see any place in the Bible that confirms this idea of evidence-based faith. What I see is faith is the evidence, not evidence.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that first, I might point out that Hebrews 11:1, I know that people go to it, but that's actually the most complicated definition there, because unless you understand the money order analogy and why specifically that faith is the evidence, then you're going to get all lost and be like, well, why do you even like when people say faith without evidence, like what faith in what? Because there has to be something that it's based off of. You're believing a testimony of Santa Claus or Easter Bunny or Tooth Fairy or God of the Bible or something. It has to be based off of something. If not, faith based on nothing would be like you just imagine something in your head and that's you believe that. Like, so it's always based off of something, unless there's some weird exception.
Well, according to the Bible, it's based on grace.
Faith is based on grace?
Yes. By grace you have been saved through faith.
By grace you have been saved through faith. Well, faith is the gift of God, so it's the grace. So okay, sure.
Right. So grace doesn't need evidence. The whole point of grace is that it's unmerited. There's nothing you can do to earn it, no matter how smart you are, or how much you know, or how much evidence you have. Grace stands alone apart from all of that. Grace comes directly from God and causes faith, and that's why you believe. Grace is the foundation of faith. There is no other foundation for faith.
Well, yeah, except that I disagree with you because I just read it in my opening statement. I'll read it again. It says, and many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples. By the way, if you actually read this, the writer of the book of John, he actually stops writing the story and he starts talking directly to the reader when he says this. He says, and many other signs truly did Jesus in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Christ. So literally he's saying, here's this testimony, and I'm telling you it that you might believe. So yeah, it's literally faith based on testimonial evidence. Like all of the apostles seem to be saying, hey, we saw it, we heard it, we claimed it, people were there, whatever, therefore believe, like based off of what we tell. Like even when when Paul was talking to Agrippa, he tells him his testimony, and then Agrippa's like, you know what, almost you persuaded me to be a Christian. Based off of what? I mean, did Paul promote that? Did he have some like the nails that were in Jesus's hands, or did he do some miracle before? No, it was just testimony.
So why is it that none of the apostles, with Paul being the exception, are said to have faith in the resurrection?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
So not a single time that an apostle encounters Jesus in his resurrection, or anybody actually that encounters Jesus that it's recorded about, is said to have faith. Rather, they see and believe. They believe. They don't have faith. When the message is preached to everybody else that has to take their word on it, it's you have to have faith. Not believe, you have to have faith. Because when you see, you believe, because that's evidence-based.
Oh, so you do agree that belief is evidence-based?
Of course.
Okay.
But it's also faith-based if you choose that route. So I'm telling you, there are two methods by which people draw conclusions and come to belief. I mean, one is evidence and one is faith. And so all of the apostles, they encounter Jesus in his resurrection, and they're said to see and believe. Paul says we live by faith, not by sight. The apostles all lived by sight. They got to experience and firsthand and have the evidence. It's empirical, and they believed.
Yeah, well,
everybody that the message is
of all things.
What's that?
Like, for example, they did have the evidence of, I get assuming that the record's true. They did see Jesus do the miracles. They did see him crucified. They did see him after and Thomas put his finger in the nail print and all that. So they did have that. What they didn't have was the evidence that Jesus was going to resurrect them after, when he comes back. Like they would have to, based off the evidence that I have experiencing Jesus and seeing his miracles, I have to believe he's actually going to do that for me. So they did have to have both. I'll agree that they saw things and, had experience and empirical evidence and stuff that we don't have. I'll give you that. But they did have to manifest some degree of faith because they weren't shown everything. They were given sufficient evidence that reasonable to believe that, hey, you could be able to trust this guy about other stuff too.
So what they end up having then is confidence based upon a person that is trustworthy, which was the analogies I used in my opening of a teenager wanting to pass his driver's test or a wife not cheating or a spouse not cheating on you. You don't know with 100% certainty, but you have a relative amount of confidence based upon the evidence that you had substantiated before you believed or had confidence in something they said was going to come true. So if Jesus did all the things he said he was going to do, they had all the evidence necessary for them to say, oh, okay, well, if he says this is also going to happen, not that many people come back from the dead or walk on water or walk through walls or do any of this. So there's a good chance that he's probably telling the truth.
Yeah.
So that would all be evidence-based. None of that is taken on the faith that we're talking about here. Faith is what was preached to everybody else that had to just take their word for it. Nobody who got to see Jesus resurrected from the dead just believed. They were told to have faith, which produced belief. Because when you have faith, it is a method of drawing conclusions without sufficient justification. Because what it ends up doing is you say, well, I don't really have a good reason to believe this, but I don't like any of the other options. And this one gives me hope. And this one sounds good. So I'm just going to say it's this one. And you just land on it. And that you convince yourself that it's true. That's what.
Okay. What's the problem with that?
What's that?
I'm not going to disagree. That sounded pretty good. Okay. So, but what's the problem with that?
Well, that's not evidence-based.
It is evidence-based. It's all about the word sufficient, and I thought this was going to happen.
Okay, so it is. Let's talk sufficient then. You heard my opening analogy about you being in court, right, with murder?
Yes. I don't remember it all in detail,
Correct.
but yeah.
I'll give it to you again. If you're on trial for murder, and the prosecutor says, Your Honor, it demonstrates without a shadow of a doubt that a human committed the murder. And then the judge says, well, how do you know it's James that committed the murder? And the prosecutor says, well, Your Honor, you just have to have faith. That faith is evidence-based, right? Because it was based on the evidence that a human did it. So that should be enough to fill the gap, right? That you did it?
No.
Why not? Isn't that how you come to believe God exists?
Well, because it could be that somebody else did it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the whole point here.
Okay, well, demonstrate how it's the point.
Okay, God is on trial for creating the universe, and you make a demonstration that it had to be some sort of designer, even though I don't think you can do that, but let's just grant that.
It had to be something nuts.
Okay, it had to be something insane.
Yeah.
And the judge says, okay, it's insane this universe came to be. How do you know it was God? Well, you just have to have faith, Your Honor. That's not sufficient evidence to draw that conclusion.
Yeah, I understand. But what I did in my opening statement is I conceded that it cannot be demonstrated, and it's all unjustifiable.
I understand that, but you're still saying that there is evidence, and I'm saying to you the evidence is insufficient for the case at hand.
Understand that. So what's the problem?
Well, I guess there isn't any if you admit that there's no evidence to demonstrate the existence of God.
No, not that there's no evidence. You're using it all hinges on the word sufficient or.
Let me ask you a question. When you're in that court situation and the judge and that prosecutor is making a case that it was a human, and he didn't make the case that it was you, he just made a case that it's human. What was the goal of the prosecutor? Was it to prove that it was you or to prove that it was a human?
I'd have to ask him, but I guess your idea you're trying to get at that it's to convince that it's me.
I would assume so, or else you wouldn't be sitting in the defense stand. So
okay.
I mean, the whole point is the case at hand is about James Prest committing the murder, not a human committing the murder. So the prosecutor proving that a human committed the murder, all the evidence perfectly lines up and proves that a human committed the murder. That is insufficient evidence for the case at hand. In fact, it amounts to zero evidence for the case at hand, because if he can't demonstrate it's you, he did nothing effective whatsoever.
Okay.
So if you have all this evidence that doesn't actually get you to God, the case at hand is about evidence for God. You don't have that evidence.
I do have the evidence. I don't have the sufficient evidence to make the case that you're trying to say.
So
and
you don't have a case.
I already conceded that.
Well, then why do you believe that God exists?
Okay, now we're getting to something more interesting. Well, one, based off of some of the things that I already said, all the options are insane. Okay, so I understand that my option's insane, but the alternative options are also insane.
But why do you have to choose one is what I'm saying. Why did you land that it's God?
Well, sure. So let me get to that. So, and I don't know if I can do this exhaustively. And I know that it's going to be considered like, well, that's still not sufficient. And I get that. and I conceded that. So if you could please not come back at me, because that's getting old. Like I already conceded this like in my opening statement. So, but ultimately, and I'll agree with you that it will come down to, well, you have to make a choice, which I guess technically you don't, because you sit on the fence essentially and say you don't know, correct?
Yes.
Yes, you just say you don't know. Okay, so there's potential consequences that come that, well, there actually are consequences with saying that there's no God, that you're not sure, or they're saying that there is. There's consequences to these. So the reality of it is that I know, like, I've listened to your what was it on History Valley? I listened to your it was like some sort of interview where it was titled and you wrote a book titled this, How to Kill God the Easy Way, I think is what it was. And I listened to it, and so I ultimately understand more or less where you're coming from, what your arguments are, at least the little bit that you gave in there. So I get that, and I agree that it ultimately boils down to, well, if you believe something, if you believe that there is a God or you believe there's no God, you're just making a choice. It's not that there's no evidence one way or the other. It's just that there's not sufficient evidence to make the case that you're saying. I agree. So you make a choice. Well, there's consequences that come with that. So if I'm wrong, then well, and I guess I'm wrong. So does that matter? Well, I guess if it's just a matter of does God exist, I don't really see how it would really matter if I'm right or wrong. If it's a matter of does a certain specific type of God exist, now and then it could start mattering. But here's the thing: even if you could prove that, I don't know how you would do this, but let's say you could prove that the Christian God is false, and it wouldn't really change my life. And here's why: because when I read the Bible and I read these testimonies and I read this stuff, I look at it and I'm like, you know what? This is intelligent stuff. These laws are good. This is the way I want to live my life. I want to be responsible. I want to be diligent. So I'm going to do it. And if it's not true, so what? This is still the way I want to live. And I'm willing to accept the consequences that come with that, which whatever those would be, I don't really know. It doesn't really matter to me. But so yeah, I acknowledge ultimately if you're going to be atheist and sure that there's no God, that requires faith, because you just don't have sufficient evidence. And if you're going to believe confidently that there is a God, that requires faith too, because again, you're saying that you don't have the conclusive evidence necessary. I'm explaining the one that I picked, and I'm explaining why I think that this is an intelligent thing, and this is the way I want to live.
If you took away the Bible, would you live differently?
I don't think that very little would change. So I keep the Sabbath.
So why do you
something that's wholly based off of the commandment of God. That's not really based off of like thou shalt not lie. Like there's reasons that I can give you that you shouldn't lie anyway. It breaks trust, destroys relationships and stuff. Fourth commandment would be the only thing that or one of the only things that would really change, because why would I rest any specific day? Like,
well, I mean, and that's just not really necessary for life anyway. So like whatever, you pick your day.
Well, I think rest is necessary. Yeah.
Whatever, pick your day. But like my point is, if you would not change without the Bible, what do you need the Bible for?
Well, I believe it's true.
You said even if you could demonstrate it wasn't true, your life wouldn't change at all. You would. The whole point is you have decided that the Bible is true. The Bible isn't true because it's true.
Yes. Yes.
Right. So it's not true on its own. It's true because James decided it was true.
Oh, I believe that it's true.
Of course you believe that it's true. My question is why?
Well, I explained why.
Well, you said that you think that the witness.
You said it's inconclusive ultimately, and I understand and I agree and I conceded all that. So I'm trying to talk past that. You're getting stuck there.
What would you like to talk about?
Well, I think there's more of the stuff that we were just getting into, which is that it does come down to a choice. If you are a Gnostic atheist, you're sure there's no God, it requires a leap of faith. If you're sure that there is a God, that requires a leap of faith too. So then I would be like, well, okay, well, what does the Gnostic atheist like? What does his life look like? And it could look ultimately very similar or even the same. Like, okay,
is there a reason you're limiting it? Is there a reason you're limiting it to those two?
Well, so So there's Gnostic, there's Gnostic atheist, agnostic atheist, Gnostic Christian, and agnostic Christian. Some people might not really believe there's such a thing as agnostic Christian. I think you could be intellectually honest with yourself and know that there's not sufficient justification and still confidently believe. So I think
an agnostic theist is essentially a deist. So I don't quite understand that position. You might as well just call yourself a deist, but I guess that's what it is. I mean, I suppose there's slight differences, but essentially it's a deist. But you keep going to, God exists, or God doesn't exist. And I'm saying those aren't the only two options, dude. Like, you can know God exists, you can know God doesn't exist, or you can be where I am and just not know at all.
Yeah, and I mentioned that as an option, sure. Yeah.
Right, but in your where you were just going, you were just stuck on those two.
Well, I'm not going to restate everything every time, but yeah, I acknowledge that there's the I don't know. I said that in my opening statement. Yeah.
Right, but the I don't know is the best answer when you don't know.
Well, you said you're leaning more towards one than the other, right?
Sure, because that's after many debates and many interactions, I've just realized how poorly Christians can defend the existence of God. So I'm just starting to lose hope that there's even a possibility. But
the inability of somebody to prove or defend the existence of God doesn't say anything about whether or not God exists. You could just be talking to dummies.
No, it certainly doesn't. But I mean, even reading anything that has been written about it for centuries,
it still wouldn't stand for anything. It just means that all the information available might just be garbage, and there's a whole bunch of information out there that's not garbage. You just don't have it yet.
I agree, which is why I continue to be an agnostic atheist. Because I'm not going to stand my ground on something when I don't know. So the best answer and the most honest answer when you don't know something is I don't know.
Right. You do know that I'm not faulting you for being an agnostic atheist, right?
No, I'm faulting you for being a theist when you don't know.
Yeah, I understand. I understand you're faulting me. I'm just wanting to clarify. I'm not faulting you for saying you don't know, because when you look at the evidence, it's not sufficient or justified or whatever. Like, I'm not faulting you for that. You are aware, right?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Although I would say that in the back, kind of a backhand, without maybe even intentionally doing it, you made the case that, well, when you land, you got to choose one or the other, and that's just not true. You don't have to choose. You got stuck in the I had to choose. You don't have to choose.
You are choosing to be agnostic because you don't know, are you not?
Yes, I'm not choosing a conclusion, though.
Well, you're choosing uncertainty. So there's a choice. My point is that there's a choice no matter which option you go with.
James, that's not a choice. Uncertainty is not a choice. I didn't wake up this morning and say, you know what? I think today I'm just going to be uncertain about things.
Well,
it's true to be uncertain.
Yeah, I understand that, but what I'm saying is you could be uncertain and choose to believe something. You do know that, right?
Okay. Can you choose right now to just be an atheist?
Could I choose to be an atheist?
Yes. Choose it right now.
I think so.
Then I just won the debate. You've chosen to be an atheist. Congratulations.
I didn't say I do it. I think you asked, can I choose it? Is that not what you said?
I said prove it. Choose it right now.
Oh, I didn't hear that part. No, I'm not choosing to be an atheist. No.
Why not?
Why would I?
Just to prove that you can, because you said you can choose.
I don't need to prove it.
Why not? You can choose to be an atheist, and then you can choose to be a theist again tomorrow.
Why couldn't I choose to be an atheist right now? Why couldn't I?
Because belief isn't a choice. You're convinced God exists. You can't just magically say, today I'm just going to be an atheist. That doesn't work like that.
Well, I think
you wake up from day to day and go back and forth and say, today I think I'm just going to experience what it's like to be an atheist.
I think you can, because I made the case that it's unjustified, like it can't be justified either way, and that it requires faith either to be an atheist, at least the Gnostic variation, or to be a Christian. Like you make the choice. It requires faith, so I could just put my faith on the other side and choose the other way. Why could I not do that? I don't understand.
James, you wear glasses, right?
Sure, yeah.
You believe you wear glasses?
Yes.
Can you choose not to believe you wear glasses? Or to believe you don't wear glasses?
That would be I could. That would be personal delusion.
Exactly.
Yeah, so here's the thing. If I don't have justifiable evidence that there's no God, why would I choose the other side? Like, why would I do that?
You have no justifiable evidence to go either way.
I conceded that.
What then? Why did you land on one?
Well, because I explained that in part, which is that I think that when I look at it, it's intelligent. It meets the criteria of insanity, which, you know, that's not a big deal. But I mean, insane has to be true.
Dude, the Marvel movies are intelligent. That doesn't mean I'm going to believe Thor exists.
Okay, then don't.
Because there's no good reason to.
But would you agree that the Marvel movies do promote? I mean, sometimes it may promote other things too, but some of the things that they're promoting, at least by the story, you know, like valuable, like virtues, like doing this to save innocent people, or risking your life to do good, or like, you do believe that they promotes good things, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So when I read the Bible and I look at it, especially as a whole, a lot of times people like to hone in on just this little part, just a little. When I look at the story of the Bible as a whole, I'm like, yeah, so I would actually want to be part of God's kingdom. I think it's good. I think it's set up with good rules. It makes a lot of sense. And something insane has to be true. This is definitely insane. And I'm fine with living this way and accepting the responsibilities involved and consequences. And so I'm going to do it. How's that a problem?
Well, it could become a serious problem if you uphold all of the Bible as God's word.
Can you demonstrate that?
Well, sure. The old God endorses slavery, rape, murder, genocide.
I disagree with you about those, and that's a separate debate.
But
there's no command in the Bible that says you have to have slaves, you have to essay people. I need you to go kill. Not to me. I understand that to the Hebrew people at the time under Moses and all this stuff. Yeah, sure, whatever. They were told specifically to go wipe out the Amalekites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, Jebusites, and all these great people. But I'm not told that. So,
do you do believe that God commanded you stone women who weren't virgins on their wedding night, right?
Yeah.
And you think that that's moral to stone someone to death?
If what they did is worthy of the death sentence, yes.
Wow. So you think stoning is the most merciful and kind method of killing somebody for an injustice?
I never said that. I said that I think that I do believe in the death penalty when something warrants it. Yeah.
And you think not being a virgin on your wedding night warrants it?
Yes, but I would want to qualify that answer.
How about being a disobedient child?
Can I qualify the answer?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the reason that I say that is because I don't think you could just suddenly impose it tomorrow on, for example, in the United States, that anybody that, you know, commits adultery or fornication or whatever is going to be stoned like the next day. I don't think this is something you could do, because there is people are already in relationships. People are already, like, they might already be pregnant. You could have a whole bunch of different things. And if you suddenly flip this overnight, then I think that this will cause a lot of problems. You're going to end up killing a lot of people and so forth. But I think what could happen, and would make sense, which they don't always do this, but if you're going to impose any new law, you should say, hey, this is going to be the new law. These are the penalties for violating them. It will be put in place in so many years or so many months. That way it gives people time to adjust, so that way they can know in advance. I don't think that it's suddenly, like, overnight it would be fine to just, like, stone somebody for having sex out of wedlock. No, I think that would be ridiculous, because they would need the education. Like, for example, Israel, they were given the education. Moses, they went to the mountain and God spoke down, and they were all terrified. They're like, hey, Moses, you talk to him and then tell us what he says. And then he did it. And then they were given the law. And so they heard everything out, what the rules were going to be. And so it's kind of like a reset, and everybody was aware in advance. And if you do that, then I think it makes sense, because then if somebody does something, hey, they did it knowing that it would warrant the death sentence. That's a little bit different than suddenly imposing something overnight. and they knew it, but they didn't know how serious it was. I mean, it could be really weird. So I think, yes, you can impose things like that, a death sentence, but I do think how it goes about being enacted is very important. I don't think you could just do this overnight.
I'm still not sure how that qualifies that women who aren't virgins should be stoned, and that's proportional to the punishment. I don't understand.
Well, that wasn't what I was attempting to do.
Well, I asked you if you thought that was proportional, that you should be
I don't remember
stoned.
that.
I asked you if you should be stoned to death for being a virgin, for not being a virgin on your wedding night, and you said yes. And you said, let me qualify it. And you went on a whole spiel about why you can't do it in America today, but you still didn't tell me why you think that's proportional.
Why is it proportional to
Yeah.
be stoned? Well, do you agree that more or less? So this is going to boil down to like a morality debate. Okay.
You don't have to go there. I was simply making the case that there are some really shitty things, some really crappy things in the Bible that God
according to who?
According to anybody who can read English.
But people read it. And some people think that's good, and some people think that's bad. So according to who?
Bad, but I mean, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of immoral things that God commands. Like just the stoning of a child for disobedience is utterly absurd. Or having bears go and kill children, maul them to death because they made fun of a bald man. Like, what is this? That makes no sense at all. My point is simply that you asked me, what's the harm in just following the Bible if it's a good book? It's not a good book. There's a lot of horrible things in there that a lot of people can actually make bad decisions with. Slavery in America, for example, was endorsed by Christians because they believed the Bible taught it.
I understand. Do you think that it's possible for Christians or anybody to misread the book and abuse it?
Of course there is. And that's my point.
It's possible for people to not misuse and abuse the book and that those bad things won't happen?
Well, if you actually if you're actually reading the book honestly and doing what it says, you're going to do a lot of bad things.
I don't think so, but okay.
But even if I'm wrong, even if reading it would make you the most holy person in the world, if you followed it completely, there are still a lot of people that would read it badly. And if it's not true,
but that's anything.
And if it's not true, then the harm in keeping it is the risk it poses.
But any piece of literature, even if you have a book that's promoting good things, and if you have somebody read it and they misunderstand it or they take it to extremes, they do something bad, that doesn't mean that there's a problem with the book. It doesn't mean that there's a problem with the guy that wrote the book.
But the difference is that the Bible is believed to be true and the holy word from God. That's entirely different than reading fiction.
Well, but yeah, I understand that it's different, but my point, that wasn't the point. The point was that somebody can read a book, misunderstand it, abuse it, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with the book. That's my point.
And that's fine, but because it's God's holy word, and this is the best he could do to.
Yeah, but you're going. If I do believe that the Bible is God's word, but I believe that people reading it are going to screw it up. I do think that. I don't think that means that there's anything wrong with the Bible. I think that just means that people can be stupid sometimes.
All right, since we're running out of time, let's not keep debating that because we're not going to go anywhere, and it's not worth the time. I want to go back to the evidence-based faith thing. I would still like an explanation as to how you see faith to be evidence-based when the whole point of faith in the Bible is that it's based on grace. How are you explaining that it's based on evidence if it's in fact based on grace? Like, in other words, if in fact a person comes to faith by grace, then all the evidence in the world doesn't make that person believe. It's grace that awakens that faith.
Grace bridges the gap. In other words, there's evidence there, but to bridge the gap, the grace, yeah.
So in other words, if you need grace to bridge the gap, then you don't have enough evidence to substantiate the belief that grace bridged.
I already conceded that.
No, but then you're conceding this whole entire debate because you are saying that you don't actually have evidence-based faith. You have evidence that doesn't substantiate the thing you're having faith in. And so you're just having faith in something that wasn't based on this evidence. Is the faith you have based on that evidence, or is the faith you have based on the grace that bridged the gap because the evidence itself was insufficient to get you there.
Well, it's both.
How is
You
it
have,
both?
well, you have faith based on evidence, but the evidence is inconclusive, and so the grace part bridges the gap. Yeah.
The case at hand is the thing you have faith in, not all this stuff over here that doesn't get you to the thing you have faith in. What good is evidence if it's inconclusive?
What do you know what the topic is for the debate?
Yes. Does the Bible
promote evidence-based faith? The answer is yes. Believe, because I wrote these things down and I'm told you that they're true. Now, you're trying to hinge it all on the word sufficient, and I knew that this would happen, and it's fine. I'm not faulting you for that, and I acknowledge that it's insufficient. I acknowledge that. That doesn't mean I'm conceding the debate. It means that I demonstrated my point with one verse. I have more verses here, but I demonstrated my point. And yes, the Bible does promote faith based on evidence. It also bases talking about faith based off of the money order thing and the personal experience, verification through participation, etc.
If I say I have a pen here, let's see if I can get my pen in the picture here.
Yeah.
See my pen?
Yeah.
I have a pen. That is evidence that I have a cup. They're not related at all. This is insufficient evidence.
Yeah, you remember the acorn thing?
Yeah.
The acorn is kind of like evidence that of a tree. Do you agree?
Yes, and if you actually had an acorn to validate the Bible and the existence of God, I would say you have a case.
If I had an acorn to validate the existence of
God, even the Bible or anything.
So I was hoping we would be able to get there, but we weren't able to get there. I don't know how much more time we have, but
we have enough for you to tell me what acorn you have, because that would be good evidence.
Well, sure. Okay, so I actually did. So when you call on Jesus to deliver you from temptation, and he delivers you, and this happens so
James, that's anecdotal. That is not independently verified.
Well, I didn't say it wasn't anecdotal. Just relax. It may be anecdotal, and it's evidence to me, but I did point out in my actual opening statement that this evidence is available to everybody. I just can't, bring it up at like a show and tell, like here's my book or something. Like, I can't say here it is, guys. Look at it, see and believe. But I did explain that anybody can have this evidence. Yes.
But it requires the grace of God, doesn't it?
Yeah, so what?
So then there isn't actually evidence that I can draw a conclusion about God from. I need God to come and convince my heart to believe he exists. Therefore, the evidence is worthless.
Well, you're misunderstanding the dead faith, living faith again. But I don't really,
because the last 2 minutes we have, I wanted to go there because I know that you wanted to talk about that. So go for it. Let's do this. The living faith, dead faith thing. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, do you understand at least? Let me ask you, what do you think is the difference between dead faith and living faith? Because before, when I tried to talk with you before, you said it doesn't matter and etc. What do you think the difference is?
I don't think there's a difference because faith is faith. I think James draws a distinction because for James, he has to say that dead faith is like what the demons do. That's evidence-based, and that's great. But even they have it and they shudder. They know God exists. What I need you to have is this living faith, the kind that doesn't depend on evidence. It's faith that is just not based on evidence.
What do you mean it's not dependent on evidence?
Because the dead faith has evidence. The living faith doesn't need evidence. It's not evidence-based. In fact, he condemns
it is
for their evidence-based faith, and he turns to the
faith.
30 seconds.
Living faith does have evidence because Jesus said, if you call on him, it's specifically in Joel, and you can find it in other different places, expressed different ways. But it's very much similar to the example that I gave in my opening statement, which is you have a friend, Jesus. He says, if you call on me, I will help you. That's testimonial evidence. Okay. In order for you to have the living faith, because living faith results in obedience, right?
And that's time.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it was there.
All right. That was lively. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, now we're going to move on to our closing statements. We'll start with James. You have 5 minutes. The clock will start on your first word.
So I didn't actually prepare a closing statement, but largely this debate did go the way that I expected. I didn't go as deep as I wanted it to, but everything is going to hinge on whether or not it's sufficient to make the court case, etc., which I conceded that it didn't. And ultimately, ultimately, I spelled everything out pretty well in my opening statement. And this is why I was able to keep referring back to it again and again and again. I think if those points were just acknowledged and so forth, that we would have been able to maybe even get further. But I guess ultimately his case was, or his desire was to want to contend each point, even though I conceded a lot of them. I don't have any problem with atheists, Gnostic or agnostic. I would have questions for them, but I don't fault anybody for having a different worldview than me. So, yeah, I'll just go ahead and leave it with that.
Okay. We said that. And on to you, Alan. You have 5 minutes for your closing. Clock will start on your first word.
So tonight's debate is about whether the Bible promotes evidence-based faith. James says that the testimonies in the Bible are sufficient evidence. Well, I assume he would think that's sufficient evidence to validate to validate his faith that God exists, or that Jesus is real and that the resurrection happens. I can only assume he would say that's sufficient, because it would seem to me that drawing a conclusion without sufficient evidence is just guessing. So James tries to make that case that it is good evidence, that you can actually base your faith on the Bible's testimony, and that in fact, supposedly, all of the people that were preached to were given this testimonial evidence from the apostles. So the apostles got to experience it, see it, touch it, taste it, the whole 9 yards, but everybody else just has to take their word on it. Okay, so that is fine and good. But the interesting thing is that James says that the evidence that demonstrates it to him is anecdotal. It's that he prays and God does things for him. This is unverifiable for anybody else. This is it can't be independently verified at all. He has to be the only one to experience it, because the only way I can experience it is if God decides to do it for me too. So no matter how much evidence I have or pursue or seek, it's never going to be good enough to give me the confidence to know that God actually exists, because I'm not willing to bridge a gap with something called faith. And the only way I could do that is if God did it for me. And for some reason, God has chosen not to do that for me. Strangely enough, I thought he did it for me for 42 years of my life. And then I realized that there's no reason to believe a God exists. So either that God's kind of a jerk for letting me go and not continuing to give me the faith that his grace initially gave me, or he doesn't actually exist. Both options are on the table, and either one is fine, because God doesn't obviously care about me and there's nothing I could do about it anyway. But the fascinating thing is, if this evidence to James is anecdotal, then what is the point of testimonies? Because the testimonies are irrelevant. They don't help whatsoever if, in fact, I have to have the grace of God awaken faith in me in order to believe he exists and believe the resurrection is true and cycle back to believe the Bible is true. So supposedly we believe the testimonies of the Bible, but we need the anecdotal evidence of God's grace to awaken my faith to turn around and believe the testimonial evidence in the Bible. So it's completely circular. There is no substantial evidence that the Bible is even true. We don't know anything about it. We have no way to validate that the people who wrote it were the people who said they wrote it. We know nothing. We take our best guesses, but it's so far back in history, we really can't know. What we can say is, in all likelihood, a man named Jesus existed. Great. But was he the Christ? Was he the Son of God? We have no good reason to think anything like that exists. We have no reason to think any of the miracles he did happened, or anybody else, any miracles in the Bible happened. We can't see them today. We can't verify miracles. We can't find them anywhere. So how can we possibly know that they happened? As far as we can tell, it's a story. But how does James know it happened? Ultimately, It's anecdote. I just feel it. Ultimately, God did something for me. God awakened my faith. It has to be God doing something personal. And how did it happen? I asked God, or I asked Jesus, and the result happened. When I say, make me a good person, he always makes me a good person, except oddly when he doesn't. But James has decided not to do the whole make me perfect today prayer, because if he prays to make me perfect today prayer, God can't actually do that and won't actually do that.
1 minute.
James will lose his entire argument with that, because why do that to God when you know he can't actually do that or doesn't want to? Because sanctification apparently is progressive, and so God can't do things any faster. We have to essentially do everything on our own and just say it's God. That's essentially what's happening. So anecdotal evidence makes testimonial evidence irrelevant. And the only way to think this testimonial evidence in the Bible has any relevancy is if you have this anecdotal evidence to begin with. So really, at the end of the day, the Bible does not promote evidence-based faith. It promotes grace-based faith. Grace isn't a thing from the God, because God probably doesn't exist. At least he doesn't for me. And so I haven't experienced this grace-based faith. And all the evidence I can see definitely doesn't point to God. It requires faith to bridge the gap. So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your closings. At this point, we are going to move into the audience Q&A. So for anyone out there that has any questions for our interlocutors, be sure to tag those questions with @SkepticHaven, so that the marvelous minds behind the scenes will be able to see them more readily. And then we can ask our interlocutors what's on their minds, maybe get some clarification. Let's see if we have any up. I think I may have seen a couple in the back. I'm waiting to see. Okay, so I guess they're going to be up on the screen. Here we go. Asking a question for Alan. If a bunch of people all believe the same claim, isn't there faith evidence of something? What they believe might not be true, but isn't it still evidence?
I would say it's evidence that they believe something. I wouldn't say that what they believe is necessarily true. We'd have to be able to test it ourselves and verify it. You may have heard of groupthink. You put a bunch of people together and get them all worked up to think the same thing's happening, and they'll all believe the same thing. Especially if you're raised in an environment that teaches certain things. So you can certainly get people to all think the same thing. That's not actually that hard. You can do it. I mean, you've heard the elevator thing. You put people in an elevator, and if everybody in the elevator is facing the wrong direction, the last person who comes in will just feel weird and face the same direction. So believing something is not evidence that it's true at all. It's just evidence that people believe something. So we'd have to still verify and test whatever they believe. Now, are we going back and forth, JL? Are we getting a chance to answer each other's questions too, or no?
If the other individual wants to respond to something that you say, that we can do that. We can give like a minute or two for a response on that. Otherwise, we'll just go to the individual who's being asked the question.
Well, the only thing that I would add to what he said was just that the guy who asked the question, he kind of agreed. Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily mean that what they believe is true, but he conceded that, and I don't know exactly why Alan was keep making the point. Yeah, but that doesn't prove anything. That was already acknowledged in the question, so I don't understand why he's driving that home.
Well, what was the question then? Can you clarify it?
Well, I don't know if he's able to bring it back up, but in the question he had said, or at least I remember reading there, that he's like, yeah, it wouldn't really mean that what they're believing is true, but isn't it still evidence? That was the question.
And I said it's evidence that they believe something. So I'm concurring that it's evidence of something, that they believe something, but it's not evidence that what they believe is true.
Yeah, but he already acknowledged that in the question. That's all that I was pointing out. And so I didn't understand why you kept pounding him with the fact that it doesn't really prove anything. He acknowledged that.
So in other words, they asked the question and answered it themselves before I got at it.
Well, he was asking if is it still evidence, which you did say it is evidence. Yeah.
Okay. But they did ask something about faith, and I would just say that wouldn't be faith, because just strictly speaking, I would say faith would be the method by which the people are using to believe in what they believe in. But I don't know how strict they were on that, how strict Ember was on that question specifically when it came to the faith part. She may want to clarify with another question, and that's fine. Anyway, I'm good. You want to move on?
All right. Let's see what our next question is. This one also from Better Than Ember. She asks a question for James. Isn't faith a thing you do? Therefore, isn't you doing it evidence?
I want to make sure that I understand the question. Isn't faith a thing? Yeah, I believe. Yes. So it is a thing that technically I do. Therefore, isn't you doing it evidence? Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Technically, yes, I guess. But that's a very interesting way of looking at it. That's not what the way that I would explain it if I was in a debate about anything. But sure, technically, yeah.
Okay. See what our next question is. Waiting for it to pop up. Let's see. Another question from Better Than Ember. She asks to Alan, if a bunch of people all
That's the same question.
we already repeated that. We repeated that question.
Yes.
That was the first one that popped up.
While we're waiting for another question, James, I just want to say it's the first night we've met in person like this, so it was really a pleasure to meet you. And I thought this conversation was good for me. I enjoyed it, and thank you for.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it too. Yeah, no, it was good. I didn't have any problems with it. It didn't go exactly the way I wanted, but I knew it was going to kind of hinge down on sufficient evidence. And I did do a little bit of research into you. I pretty much all that means is I watched that one YouTube video. I'm very busy. I can never sit still. If ever I get a moment, I'm just pacing. So I understand kind of where you're coming from, and I can more or less I don't want to say feel your pain, but I do understand your perspective and why you think what you do and stuff, and it makes sense.
Right, and I appreciated your pushback and all the stuff you said. And believe it or not, I understand more than you think where you're coming from. So because I definitely was a Christian for 42 years, so I totally understand where you're coming from. And so I pushed hard because I definitely see it as a bad way to determine truth, but it's okay. That was the point of the whole debate. So,
all right, we have a next one, also from Better Than Ember. Question, and not directed towards any one individual, so I'm going to assume it might be for both. If you can choose to believe something different, why not do so now?
I'll just say you can't choose to believe something different. Belief doesn't change by a choice. It changes when you're convinced. So I can't just one day decide you don't believe, like I said in the analogy with James, he can't just believe he doesn't wear glasses. That would be impossible. And he would have to somehow go blind or lose senses somehow, and somebody would have to convince him he no longer wears glasses, and then he would believe it. But it's not something you can just shift on. James?
Yeah, so the reason that, and I do believe that you can change what you believe by a choice. The reason that I don't is because I think that looking at the overall picture of what the Bible is, like the story of the whole of it all, the plan of redemption, the fall of man and stuff, this believing it gives hope to people. It gives purpose and it gives direction. Hope, I'm not so big on hope because I really don't hope for much. I think it's largely a waste, but I understand its function. Most people can't really live without it. But it does give purpose and direction, which you can still have that without. But I do think that it just makes a really lot of sense. And it's a very intelligent story. I mean, yeah, you can argue that it's all hoax, but there's no reason that I could think that I wouldn't want to align myself with it. So that's why I won't just change my mind. Like, I mean, obviously I do believe that it's true, but I have no reason. Like, what is the alternative offering? Well, nothing. They're just offering ignorance, which is fine. I mean, I guess, but I don't see anything that they're really offering.
All right. Let's see. Don't have one up there. I know we have some others me see if I can scroll.
While you're looking, James, can I ask you a question? And this isn't for debate because I'm just curious myself.
Oh, yeah.
What is it you believe you stand to lose or miss out on if, as you put it, you can choose, if you chose no longer to believe God exists and be a Christian?
What would I be like? What would I lose if I accepted your view?
Yeah, what would be the consequences for you? Like, what would be the negative to no longer being a Christian for you?
I'm assuming you're talking in my life today.
Sure.
What would I lose? It's not so much what I would lose. It's just I don't really have anything to gain by doing it. Like a lot of people would probably say, well, I'd be losing eternal life. And I'm like, eternal life doesn't interest me. It never really has. So that's not, I could keep a lot of the same morals and principles and carry them over wherever I would do, because I don't think God's law is the, I think God's law was adapted from a higher moral standard. And I think it was adapted to meet humanity as humans, and because humans have a nature and they're a certain way, but I think that morality comes from something higher, and God adapted from that higher thing too. So I can keep the same morals. I don't really care about eternal life. I guess, what would I be losing? I have nothing really to gain. It's not really so much what I would be losing. It's just there's nothing to gain. It seems like I would just be entering this field of I don't know, which, I mean, you could argue technically that I don't know now. I just believe, but believing it makes more sense than just I don't know.
Well, I do have the next question here. I found it in the side chat there. Oh, and here it is. Question for James. If you can actively choose your beliefs, can you actively choose right now to believe that the room you're in is about to collapse on you?
Yeah, I could. Ultimately, I don't know that there would be evidence for that. Well, actually, there's a spot on the floor over here that I need to fix because it is caving in. I could choose to believe it actively. I guess the idea that he's getting at is, would I suddenly like act and like get up and leave? So I think some things are harder to believe than others. I think that would be a hard one for me to believe because this floor is pretty stout, except over there. But can you actively choose right now to believe?
I think to clarify, I think the issue is, would it be because you're not convinced the room is about to collapse on you?
Yes. Yeah, I would not be convinced that would be the case. Yeah.
So you couldn't believe it if you were not convinced of it.
Well, I don't want to say that, because people can fool themselves. They can like practice self-deception or engage in delusions. And so that because of that, there is this, as long as we understand that that's an exception, because people can do that, and they do that oftentimes for various reasons, because they can't deal with the consequences of not believing a lie, stuff like that. But as long as we acknowledge that there's the exception of people like deluding themselves on purpose.
Okay. I do have the next one here in the side chat. This one is from Inquiry 20. Can you complement the other one on something preferably, or can you complement the other one on something, preferably something said well in their debate, or qualities that you admire or appreciate in the other one, open-mindedness, skeptical, etc.?
Sure. I appreciated James's understanding of the difference between dead faith and living faith in James. I think that from his perspective, because faith is something that is evidence-based, even though he would admit it's not sufficient to get you all the way, but it's still enough evidence to say, hey, this warrants us to go ahead and land on a position. And he would say that the dead faith stays with the one who only goes up to the evidence where it goes and says, can't believe, or believes but doesn't follow, or however you would choose to define that. But by taking that living faith, that's what gives you that wonderful life that you have with God and with Jesus, assuming I'm understanding his position correctly. So I think that's great, and I do understand the desire to draw a conclusion, because I get it. It's uncomfortable to not know, but you got to, it's unfortunate, because I think we're raised in this from birth, and so I don't think James is just doing this on purpose to be stubborn. He genuinely believes it, and so I understand why he does, and I can get that. So he's true to himself. He's willing to stand up for what he believes. He's willing to have a conversation with me, even knowing that I was going to press him on insufficient evidence, and yet he still chose to be here. So I think that's awesome. He's open-minded. He's even admitted that there's things he wants to think about. So that's cool. I mean, I can't knock him for that. It's about as good a debate as you can go when if you're having an integrity. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the things that I would compliment Alan on or admire, I do, and I appreciate that you gave me some options there. But yeah, definitely the skeptic mind. Like I'm not a hardcore skeptic myself, but I think that if you do not have enough skepticism about things, what happens is you just end up brainwashed. You're just going to believe because somebody told you, the pastor told you. You're not actually going to weigh them out. Like, and I've weighed things out, and I acknowledge that, yeah, you can't justify it either way, and I made a decision, but I knew what I was doing when I did it. And so I think the skeptical thing that Alan has is good. I think it's good. I think anything can become a problem. I mean, if Alan got like really out of hand with his skepticism, he'd be like, well, I don't know if this country is real, the earth might be flat, or maybe Trump's not the president, or I mean, you can go with it too far, but I think skepticism is good to a point. I think it's healthy. And so that with that comes the open-mindedness and so forth. But I really do appreciate when people challenge their views, they question their views. There's consequences that all come with that, but I think an intellectually honest person should do that. One thing that I don't like a lot of times with Christians, and I know there's exceptions to this, but they're not willing to be intellectually honest with themselves. And it's like, but you're a Christian, and Christians are supposed to be honest, and you're not being intellectually honest. So how are you, like, it's like you're not measuring up. So I appreciate him for his skeptical and questioning approach to things. I think it's very healthy and necessary to avoid brainwashing.
Did we just become best friends?
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Well,
afterward, man.
We can figure it out right now. I believe the episodes 1 through 6 of Star Wars are the only that's it. Anything that Disney made is not actually canon. That's my position. Are we best friends?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. Although I will admit, I did enjoy it. I did. I can't help it. I enjoyed all of them, but yeah, they did have a different flavor to them. I do happen to agree with you, but I can't say it didn't end well. I did enjoy it. I did.
Always got to invoke the Holy Trilogy.
That's right.
All right. Next question up is from Better Than Ember. Question for both. What question do you wish your opponent had asked you?
I technically have it here. I just got to figure out where it was. Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
Man, if I had something, I'd go first. I can't think of something that I want you to ask me. This stumped me. What would I have wanted you to ask me?
Well, I'll go first. So when a person, because I claim that you can go to Jesus and you can ask for victory over temptation, and he will give it to you, like 100% of the time, guaranteed, always. I understand that some Christians will get stuck here because they don't understand temptation. If you don't understand temptation, which is basically Matrix style brainwashing, you're going to get really confused. But Jesus will always deliver you, provided that you follow the simple instructions and so forth. Again, people do get stuck on temptations. You're always welcome to contact me about it. But the thing that I was expecting, and I'm almost kind of hoping to answer your question, that he was going to point out, is that well, what if that's not evidence of Jesus? What if Jesus helping you? What if that's evidence just that, when you believe something in your mind that you can overcome and so forth? I was hoping that we could get into that because that's a very interesting thing. And I come out on top in the end of that also as well. But I think I was hoping that he's going to go there because I wanted to get into that. I think that's fun.
I agree. That would have been fun. And I mean, I pressed it a little bit, but we couldn't do it. We couldn't do everything very much. It was just
we had time restraints. Yeah,
time restraints, but that's okay. That's a fun discussion, though. I suppose one of the things, since I have to answer it, one of the things that I guess I wish you would have asked me because it might have led to some more conversation is a question about my Christian life, like what made me believe, or what caused me to stop believing, or something along those lines, because that could have touched on maybe some of the reasons why I don't believe versus why you do, or something like that.
Sure. And one of the reasons I probably didn't is because I listened to you on History Valley where you explained why.
And that's cool because I wasn't genuinely something I cared for you to ask, but I answered the question. So in a theoretical, that's what I wish you would have asked.
Yeah.
But you did great.
All right. Question from Better Than Ember. It's not indicating for any one of you, any specific one of you, so I'm assuming it's for both. Isn't choosing a belief because you prefer the outcome it promises just an argument from consequences?
Yes, I would say that number one, again, you can't choose a belief, but I would say that when you're convinced of something, it should be based on solid evidence. It should be based on truth. You should want to know the truth, not just what makes you comfortable or avoids consequences. So I would say truth to me is far more important than what makes me comfortable. There's a lot of things about atheism that I don't necessarily like. I mean, I love most of it, and way more than Christianity ever offered. But sure, there are some things that it definitely sucks. But just thinking about some of the things, it's like, oh yeah, well, it's just the way life is. Or at least they did at one point until it took me some time to adjust to it. But it's truth. Well, at least it is. That's the way I understand it, because I think it's based on lack of evidence of anything else. So I just rest here and say, hey, this is what reality is. So anyway, I'm belaboring my point. But go ahead, James.
Yeah. So my answer to the question that yes, it is an argument from consequences. However, and which an argument from consequences is falls in the logical fallacy category, or it often gets grouped in with them, or it's a tactic or something like this. I do want to point out that, however, that while it is an argument from consequences, considering consequences is a good thing. Which I'm not one to really care so much about the consequences. I just want to do what's right because it's right, to the best of my knowledge, be the best person I can be. And if that gets me in big trouble or killed or whatever, I don't really care. I want to live an honorable life. And I'm willing to accept those consequences.
All right. And there was a question that it was from the Mirror Point, and I want to address this one real quick before we get to the one from Spam, because it wasn't formatted as a question, but there is a question buried in there. And so this question is for Alan from the Mirror Point. Is it logical to believe that the Bible is true because it says it's true in 2 Timothy 3:16?
It's logical to believe it's true if you already believe the Bible's true. So I would say no, because you actually have to believe that it's what that statement is saying is true to begin with. So it requires circular reasoning, and I don't think that's logical at all.
Okay, that's what I want to go there. All right, and jumping, I didn't want to miss that one because I think that was an important point. I think it just didn't get formatted right.
Sure.
So going on, I saw Better Than Embers, and going down to Spam goes here.
JL, real quick, can James have a chance to answer that? Because I'm imagining he's itching to, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, James, do you have a response to that statement about is it logical to believe the Bible is true just because it says it's true in Timothy?
Well, technically, it could fall under circular reasoning. However, there is exceptions. Well, I had to be careful because there's circular reasoning, then there's begging the question.
Technically, the same thing. It's the same thing.
Huh?
It's the same thing. Begging the question is circular reasoning. It's assuming the truth of the conclusion within the premises.
Sure. Circular reasoning has an additional step. So I'm against circular reasoning. Begging the question, however, is a little bit different because, so for like some things have exceptions. That's kind of what I'm getting at here with begging the question. Here's this pudding. It tastes good. Well, what's your evidence? Well, that it tastes good. Sometimes it actually is fine to have begging the question as long as it falls in the exception category. I do think that the question being asked was circular reasoning, which is illogical. So,
okay, all right. This next one from To Spam Goes here. Oh wait, was it from Spam? Yes. Question, and I'm going to assume that this is for both of you. What would you say is the strongest point against your position, asked or not asked? What is your kryptonite?
Strongest point against my position would be the position of I don't know, while is an honest position because I don't know, could be criticized as, well, if you don't know, then how can you be sure that there isn't sufficient evidence to demonstrate that God exists and that I actually have it and I just don't know how to communicate it to you? So I suppose then the I don't know could be my kryptonite.
Okay.
I don't know what asked or not asked means, but
that it was whether it was asked during the debate or not asked during the debate.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the strongest point against your position? So, strongest point being relative. I don't think that, let me clarify what I mean by I say that. So, if you have a bunch of weak arguments against my position, but one of them's the strongest, it might be the strongest, but they're all weak. So I don't know that there's a really strong argument against my position. However, I think the best that they have is going to be the existence of evil. Why didn't God prevent it? I do think there's really good answers to all this, which is why I don't think it's a very strong argument. But that's usually the one that's I think is going to be considered the strongest.
Like the argument from divine hiddenness.
Well, why did God create the guy that became Satan?
No, the argument from divine hiddenness is that if it is God's goal that it should love everybody, if God loves everyone and it's his goal to have a relationship with everyone, then it behooves it to make itself known to have that relationship, because a relationship is two-way by definition. And so if it is his goal to do that, then it ought to do that. But if there exist people who non-resistantly non-believe, then that means that the God is not doing that. Therefore, that God does not have that and that God does not exist. If you're defining it as being all loving and wanting a relationship with people, because then it would be doing that. But since it's not doing that, then we know it doesn't exist. This it's an argument from divine hiddenness as articulated by J.L. Schellenberg.
Right. I've recently had a debate specifically about this topic. But what I'm saying to answer their question is basically Epicurus's argument. If God is all loving, then he cannot be all, or sorry, if God is all good.
The trilemma.
Huh?
Yeah. The trilemma. The Epicurean trilemma, yeah.
That would be ultimately, I think, is their strongest argument. I just think that there's really good answers. So I don't think it's strong, but I think it's the strongest they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do see this one. It was from Mulva22, who didn't tag Skeptic Haven, but I did see it. It has to be asked because we have, I think, a good collection of nerds here. What is the airspeed of an unladen swallow?
Well, that depends. Do you mean a European swallow?
Yes. He knows it. He knows it. What do you mean? An African or European swallow?
It's so great.
I love that. I love that.
Yep.
Saw that for I thought I had it wasn't tagged Skeptic Haven, but I had to read it because we always need a good nerd question in there.
Super fun.
All right. Oh, I do want to ask y'all because we got nerds here. This is always fun. Just really quick, just off the top of your head. James, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Alan, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Okay, there you have it. Now, you guys out there know that about these gentlemen here. All right. Well, it looks like that's the end of the tagged questions that we had in the chat. All right. Well, I want to say a huge, giant thank you to each one of our interlocutors for participating tonight. You guys rocked. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for doing this. This was fun.
Yeah,
Nothing
no,
to do on my Friday night.
All right. Well, I think we're in good shape. And I want to send out a huge, giant thank you to all of the Patreons out there, all of our YouTube members, and of course, the audience, you, each and every one of you who is hanging out here for your continued support. And a massive thank you to the minds behind the scenes who make all this happen, to Bree, Michael, and Wes. Obviously, this is an awesome little thing you've created for all of us here, and we thank you for that. If you out there are interested at all in volunteering your time, reach out to skeptichaven@gmail.com, and you can assist us in doing all this craziness here and having these awesome conversations that need to happen in this day and age. So be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and make sure you tickle that little bell, okay? Make sure that bell is on to make sure you don't miss any of the future debates. And be sure to leave a comment below on what you think was good, what you think was bad, how we can improve, anything at all, because that helps to drive us in the algorithm. So all of those interactions really, really help. All right. So I want to thank to each and every single one of you. You have a great rest of your night. We will see you all in the next one right here at the Thought Experiment on Skeptic Haven.
Thanks for watching The Thought Experiment, the arena where religion, politics, and philosophy step into the ring and ideas get tested. Here, we don't dodge the hard questions. We confront them. We weigh arguments, challenge assumptions, and follow the evidence wherever it leads. If you enjoy sharp thinking and honest debate, you're in the right place. Like the video if you found it thought-provoking, subscribe so you never miss a debate, and most importantly, tell us in the comments who won tonight. We read them, we feature them, and sometimes they shape the next episode. Until next time, keep thinking, and we'll see you in the next Thought Experiment.